The prairie at dusk shimmered like an old dream. The light had gone honey gold, stretching long and soft over the grasslands until even the shadows seemed to breathe. Clara Whitlock rode through that silence, her hat pulled low, her eyes half narrowed against the wind. The land was so empty it almost felt holy. Just her, the rustle of the grass, and the aching memory of things she couldn't fix. Her father's voice still lived somewhere in that wind, calling her name from years ago, before the bank took their land and the world learned to pity the Whitlock girl. She was 26 now, a cowgirl without a ranch, a woman who rode alone because no one expected her to stay. In town, they whispered about her when she passed. How proud she looked for someone who'd lost everything. How she never smiled unless she was on horseback. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the ridges, her horse slowed. The air shifted, sharp with the scent of iron and dust. Ahead, near the creek bed, she saw it, a trail of blood darkening the pale stones. She followed it down the slope until she found the source, a dapple-gray stallion lying in the grass, breathing in ragged fits. The sight stopped her heart. He was half-starved, ribs like bowed wood under his skin, a deep gash slicing through his flank. One eye fluttered open as she approached, glassy with pain but still proud. She spoke softly, her voice trembling with something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Easy, boy. I won't hurt you." The stallion tried to rise, stumbled, and fell again. Mud streaked his coat, and under the grime she noticed a faint old brand, nothing she recognized. There was a rope mark too, rubbed raw around his neck, like someone had tried to drag him until he broke. Clara knelt beside him, pressed her palm against his trembling side, and felt his heart still fighting. She could have walked away. Maybe she should have, but she knew what it felt like to be left behind. The creek murmured beside them, the world turning colder as night crept in. She tore her handkerchief into strips, cleaned the wound as best she could, and whispered, "You don't die on me, not tonight." When she rose to her feet, the light was gone from the sky. Far to the north, she saw the faint outline of the mountains, blue and ghostly under the rising moon. Somewhere up there, hidden among the pines, was an old trail cabin her father once took her to when she was a girl. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. She tied the reins loosely around her wrist and began to walk, coaxing the horse forward. Every few steps, he faltered. Every time he did, she whispered encouragement, her voice a thin thread of warmth in the cold. The rain came slow and fine, soaking her coat, plastering her hair against her neck. Her boots filled with mud, and still she walked. By the time they reached the foothills, darkness had settled deep. The path turned rocky, lined with slick roots and the scent of pine. She could feel her arms shaking from exhaustion, but she didn't stop. The stallion limped behind her like a ghost refusing to fade. When at last she reached the ridge, she saw it, the faint orange flicker of firelight in the distance. Smoke rose thinly through the mist. She froze. Someone was living up here. For a moment she hesitated. The townsfolk always warned her about the mountains, said a man lived there, half crazy, dangerous. But she looked back at the horse, blood dripping into the mud, and her heart made the choice her mind feared. She led him forward. The cabin emerged from the darkness, timbers weathered to silver, roof patched with bark and tar. As she neared, a shape moved behind the window. A door creaked open, and a man stepped into the rain. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his beard rough and gray-streaked. In one hand, he held a rifle, though he didn't point it. His voice came low and wary. "You lost?" Clara tightened her grip on the reins. "No. Found something that needs help." She stepped aside so the firelight caught the stallion's wound. "He won't make it through the night without tending." The man's eyes flicked to the horse, then back to her. Something softened in his expression, though he didn't move. "Ain't my business what strays you drag through this storm. It is if you've got fire and bandages," she said quietly. "Please." For a long moment, only the rain answered. Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the cabin. She stood there, shivering, ready to lead the horse away, but then the door swung open again. The man had cleared a space by the hearth. "Bring him in," he said. Inside, the cabin was small but neat, tools hanging on the wall, a table carved from pine, a battered coffee pot hissing on the stove. In the corner stood a broken piano, its keys yellowed like old teeth. The smell of wood smoke filled the air. The man set down his rifle, rolled up his sleeves, and knelt beside the stallion. His hands were steady, sure. He cleaned the wound, stitched it carefully, never saying a word. Clara knelt nearby, holding the horse's head, murmuring comfort. Between them, the fire cast long shadows that danced over the walls. When the worst was done, he rose and poured 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one without meeting her eyes. "Name's Elias," he said. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "Wasn't planning to be," she replied, her voice hoarse. He needed help. Elias nodded slightly, as though he understood something deeper than her words. They drank in silence. The storm raged outside, wind howling through the pines, rain hammering against the roof. "That it last?" she asked. "You live here by yourself?" "Long time now," he said. His eyes were distant, not unkind. "Folk talk too much in town. Easier to let the world forget you." Clara stared into the fire. "I know that feeling." For a while, neither spoke. The stallion breathed softly beside the hearth, the flicker of the flames glinting off his coat. Elias watched the animal, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice barely more than a whisper, he said, "He's got fight left in him. Most don't, when they're that far gone." Clara's throat tightened. Maybe he just needed someone to believe he could stand again. Elias looked at her for the first time then. Really looked, and something passed between them. Quiet as the rain. Recognition. 2 souls who had both been left in the dust and found. Somehow, a reason to keep breathing. When the night deepened, Elias spread a blanket on the floor near the fire. "You can rest there," he said. She nodded, too tired to protest. The warmth of the flames blurred the edges of the world. She watched the horse's chest rise and fall, steady now. The storm song fading to a hushed I in that moment. With her boots still damp and her heart strangely light, Clara realized the strangest thing of all. She hadn't saved that horse to feel merciful. She'd done it to feel alive again. Outside, the wind carried the scent of wet pine and smoke. Inside, the 2 strangers sat in silence, their burdens resting quietly between them. And for the first time in years, Clara Whitlock fell asleep without dreaming of loss. Only the faint rhythm of breathing beside a fire that still had the strength to burn. Morning came pale and slow through the cracks in the cabin wall, the kind of light that makes dust shimmer like tiny ghosts in the air. The fire had gone to ash. Clara stirred beneath the wool blanket, her body heavy from the storm's chill. The gray stallion lay beside the hearth, sleeping soundly, his wound clean and stitched. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Only the faint scent of pine smoke and coffee grounds reminded her. Then she saw the man outside. Elias Boone stood near the corral, his shape framed by mist and sunlight. He was splitting wood, the swing of his axe calm, rhythmic. The mountain air around him glowed gold and cold, and it struck her how easily solitude could look like peace from a distance. She stepped outside, rubbing her arms against the chill. "You're up early," she said. He glanced over, half smiling. "Been up since the storm stopped. Thought I'd check if your friend there's still breathing." "He's stronger," she said softly. "I think he's got a name now." "Ashen." Elias nodded, testing the word. "Fits him." She walked past the corral toward the barn. Something in her gut told her this place carried more than silence. The barn's doors groaned open. Inside, old tack hung from beams, and in the corner, beneath a torn tarp, a broken wagon sat half buried in hay. She stepped closer. The faded mark on the wooden panel stopped her cold. The same brand burned into Ashen's flank. Her breath caught. She turned toward the cabin where Elias now watched her from the doorway. For a long moment, they didn't speak. The truth was already hanging between them, thick as the mountain air. Over breakfast, she finally asked, "That horse, he belonged to you, didn't he?" Elias set his cup down gently. His shoulders stiffened, and for a while, he just stared into the steam rising from his coffee. "He did," he said. "Used to run a ranch not far from here. Years back, before it burned." Clara listened, her pulse slowing, the world narrowing to his voice. "Bandits came one night," he said quietly. "Took the herd, burned everything I built, killed my wife trying to stop them. I rode after him. Killed 2, maybe 3. But the others got away. Town said I went mad, that I killed for gold. Sheriff told me best to disappear. So I did. Been here since." His voice faltered on that last word. He didn't look at her, just stared out the window as if the mountains might forgive him. Clara felt the old ache of her own past rising, the loss, the shame, the loneliness. People talk, she said gently. They don't always know the truth. Truth don't much matter once a story starts walking on its own, he murmured. Town needed a villain, and I was easier than the men who really did the killing. She wanted to speak, but there was nothing to say. So she reached across the table and set her hand over his for just a breath, a silent gesture that told him she believed him. He didn't pull away. The day drifted quiet after that. Elias worked near the stream, mending fences. Clara cleaned the cabin, tending to ashes wound. The air between them changed, not softer exactly, but clearer, as though something had uncoiled by late afternoon. Thunder rolled faintly from the east, though the sky above the ridge stayed blue. That was when she saw the riders, 3 men on dark horses climbing the slope below. Dust followed them like a banner. Elias noticed too. His jaw tightened. They're bounty hunters, he said. Been looking for me since the fire. Why now? Because someone in town must have said they saw a woman heading up this way. Thought I'd gone and found company. He started for his rifle, but she caught his arm. No, let me talk to them. Before he could argue, she stepped outside. The men reined their horses at the clearing's edge. One had a scar across his cheek, the leader by the way he leaned forward in the saddle. You alone up here, miss? He asked. She met his eyes without flinching. Just me and a wounded horse. Been here since the storm. The man looked past her, toward the cabin. Heard tell a man named Boone might be hiding in these hills. Then you heard wrong, she said quietly. Ain't no one here but ghosts. Something in her tone unsettled him. The riders exchanged glances. The leader nodded once, spat into the dirt, and turned his horse downslope. Within minutes, the sound of hooves faded into the valley. Clara stood still until the wind swallowed the last echo, then turned back. Elias stood in the doorway, watching her like someone seeing sunlight after years underground. You lied for me, he said. You patched up my horse, she replied. They both smiled small, uncertain smiles that held more gratitude than words ever could. That night, the mountains were clear, the stars bright as cold fire. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean. Clara packed her saddlebag, preparing to leave at dawn. Ashen could walk now, and she couldn't stay. Some things had to keep moving. Elias sat by the fire, silent. You'll take him with you? He asked finally. He'll need open fields again, she said. So will I. He nodded, but there was something else in his eyes, regret, maybe longing. Then he said, wait, there's something I need to show you. He led her to the barn, lifted a loose board near the wall, and pulled out a small trunk wrapped in burlap. When he opened it, she froze. Inside lay papers stamped with an old seal, her father's ranch deeds, the Whitlock brand tools, the proof of everything her family once owned. I worked for your pa once, Elias said softly. When the fire came to his place, I went back after. Saved what I could. Thought someday I'd give it back. But the longer I hid, the harder it got to face what I'd become. Tears blurred her sight. She knelt beside the trunk, tracing the faded mark on the wood. All this time, he looked down, shame and hope tangled in his face. Guess the horse found the one person meant to know. The cabin filled with silence, the kind that feels alive. Outside, the wind sighed through the trees like the world was letting go. Clara stood, brushing the dirt from her palms. You didn't just save him, Elias. You saved what was left of us. He met her eyes, and for a heartbeat, the years between them, grief, guilt, loneliness, fell away. He reached out, touched her shoulder gently, then stepped back. Ride careful, he said at dawn. She saddled Ashen and looked once more at the cabin. Elias stood by the doorway, the rising sun catching the gray in his beard, the mountains glowing behind him. She wanted to say something that would make the moment last. A promise, maybe, but words felt too heavy. So she only nodded, and he nodded back. She rode down the ridge slow, the wind in her hair, the valley spreading wide and golden below. Each hoofbeat carried her farther from loss, closer to something she couldn't name yet. Something like peace at by noon. The mountains were behind her. The town lay ahead, small and distant, its rooftops catching the light. She carried her father's papers against her chest and a new steadiness in her heart. The whispers would start again, no doubt, but this time, she wouldn't flinch, because somewhere high above the valley, A man who'd once vanished from the world had been found again, not by law, not by chance, but by mercy. And sometimes, mercy is the one thing strong enough to stitch the broken back together. If you ever find yourself wandering with nothing but ghosts for company, remember Clara Whitlock and the wounded horse that led her home. Some roads begin in loss, some in kindness, but all roads that lead toward forgiveness are worth the miles they take.